Hello, good evening. As Ukraine intensifies its offensive into Russia's Kursk region, the stakes in the Russia-Ukraine conflict rise. With Ukrainian forces pushing deeper into Russian territory, the international landscape is shifting. China's support for Russia through strategic minerals raises questions about Beijing's role in the war. Meanwhile, US sanctions and President Trump's shifting stance on peace talks add new layers of complexity. How will these developments reshape the conflict's trajectory in the coming days? Stay tuned for insights into these unfolding global dynamics. Welcome to Think Tank. Politico has reported that Keith Kellogg, Donald Trump's special envoy, proposed ramping up sanctions on Russia, particularly targeting its oil sector, to increase economic pressure on Putin. He criticized Biden's approach, advocating for a more comprehensive strategy that integrates military, economic, and diplomatic tactics. Kellogg stressed that both Ukraine and Russia must make concessions for peace and highlighted the importance of leverage in negotiations. As Ukraine faces ongoing Russian attacks, Ukrainian officials continue to push for direct involvement in any peace talks, with hopes of engaging Trump's team at the Munich Security Conference to address the conflict's resolution. The Eurasian Times has reported that Donald Trump is pushing for a deal to secure Ukraine's rare earth minerals in exchange for US aid, a proposal President Zelensky has responded positively to. This arrangement could provide significant resources for Ukraine's fight against Russia, while ensuring continued American support. Ukraine is rich in critical minerals valued up to $26 trillion, but Russia has seized control of 70% of these resources, particularly in Donetsk and Luhansk. These resources are crucial for global industries like electronics, energy, and defense. The battle over Ukraine's mineral wealth highlights geopolitical competition, with both Russia and China vying for dominance in the global rare earths market, impacting the future of global technology supply chains. So, as Ukraine intensifies its offensive into Russian territory, former President Trump's delayed response raises critical questions about his role in the evolving Russia-Ukrainian conflict and the shifting global dynamics.
The ongoing Russian-Ukrainian conflict continues to evolve, especially with recent developments such as Ukrainian forces launching incursions into Russia's Kursk region. This new offensive, which extends up to 3 miles into Russian territory, has dramatically escalated the situation, prompting a significant shift in the dynamics of the war. With such significant moves, the question arises, how will former US President Donald Trump respond, particularly given his promises during his campaign to resolve the war quickly? Trump has long positioned himself as a potential peacemaker. Initially, he claimed he could end the fighting within 24 hours of taking office, later extending this timeline to 6 months. Yet, despite this rhetoric, he has refrained from significant intervention in the conflict. Several factors influence this delay, including the intricate international landscape, Trump's focus on domestic issues like US immigration policies, and his prioritization of security concerns such as the Gaza conflict. Compounding the uncertainty is the geopolitical landscape. While Trump has indicated his willingness to ramp up sanctions on Russia, a shift in alliances, particularly with China providing critical minerals to Russia, complicates matters. As Ukraine intensifies its military campaign, the situation grows more unpredictable, with international involvement shifting the balance further. Trump's hesitation might also stem from the complexities of the current U.S. political environment. The suspension of U.S. aid to Ukrainian and Russian independent news outlets has weakened independent reporting, which could make peace negotiations more difficult. Given these factors, it remains unclear how Trump's role will crystallize, especially as both Ukraine and Russia continue to stake out irreconcilable positions.
Now, providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the upcoming Trump's role in stopping it. Joining us from Cairo is Dr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist, and from Kyiv by Mr. Ivan Uis. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Mr. Uis is an advisor at the Ukrainian National Center. So thank you both for being here. We'll start with you in Cairo, Dr. Osman. Ukraine launched a new attack inside Russia's Kursk region, expanding its incursion into Russian territory by up to 3 miles, with Zelensky's office accusing Moscow of indifference to the fate of its Russian citizens. Will Russia respond militarily within its own borders?
Thank you for having me, Mark, and greetings to you and to your guest. Well, to put things into perspective, the battlefield situation of Ukraine had been rather abysmal for more than a year, way before Trump came back into office. It actually started deteriorating after the utter failure of the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the summer of fall, in the spring and summer of 2023. And since then, the Russians have been gradually advancing in Donetsk and Lugansk, and even in some parts of the Kharkiv Oblast. So the only way that the Ukrainians could attempt to stop this momentum and to even gain more ground, just in preparation for any potential negotiation to improve their negotiating positions, they launched a rather surprising and daring offensive into Russian territories, capturing about 1,000 square kilometers of the Kursk Oblast inside Russia, and embarrassing Russia on a spectacular level. However, the Russians regrouped, and so far they have captured over 55% of the Kursk Oblast. And recently, and then Trump came along to office and started reportedly reducing aid to Ukraine and pushing for a settlement that might be on the expense of Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty, basically, because they will have to give up at least the territories that the Russians have managed to control over the past almost 3 years of war. So now the Ukrainians are trying to improve their positions by launching another offensive inside the Kursk region, capturing a few villages and sustaining high casualties and inflicting high casualties on the Russian troops, and even reportedly on the North Korean troops that are fighting in the Kursk Oblast in accordance with the Mutual Defense Pact treaty between Russia and the Democratic Republic of Korea. However, I don't think that this will improve Ukraine's position dramatically. Yesterday, Russia captured Toretsk, an immensely important strategic city in Donetsk, and they are now advancing on the strategic logistical hub of Pokrovsk. So I think that the Ukrainians are in dire straits, and no offensives inside the Kursk region can change the momentum that is currently clearly in the favor of the Russian armed forces.
Well, coming to you, Mr. Uis, let's talk about Donald Trump a little bit. The suspension of U.S. aid has had a significant impact on both Ukrainian independent news outlets, which has relied on grants to operate and often produce work critical of their governments. I mean, how does cutting off this support affect the quality and integrity of independent news and reporting in Ukraine?
Good evening from Kyiv. Greetings to you and your guest. Of course, United States of America support played an important role. At the beginning of the full-scale war, the 2022, actually, mainly the support of the United Kingdom and the United States of America helped Ukraine at least to defend our capital, Kyiv, and then to release serious part of the territories that Russia captured through the first months of full-scale war. Then this support, and that time it was mainly US support, help us to stabilize situation, and thanks to HIMARS and other weapons that Ukraine start to receive from the United States, with all that weapon, Ukraine really have a good results closer to the end of 2002, when the situation was rather stabilized, as I said, and it gives us opportunity even to release some parts of our Kharkov region and the city of Kherson, the only center of the region that was captured by Russia. 2023, yes, our expected counter-offense was not so successful, and in 2024, Russia more attacks than Ukraine do something. That's why the only success in the previous year, it was actually Kursk region, due to the small fact that Ukraine, after receiving permission from the United States of America to use their weapon on the Russian territory, transfer the war to Russian territory. That's the main reason of Kursk's operation, that now this war happened not only at the Ukraine, but in Russia too. And now, of course, for Ukraine, it's very important to preserve the support of US. It was stopped for a small period, but then it resumed, according to official statements. And now, of course, we have negotiation with the United States of America, with the new administration, to prolong the support, and we try to explain to them that it could be beneficial to them too. Thank you.
And Dr. Osman, during his campaign, Trump promised to end the fighting within 24 hours of taking office. I'm not sure many people thought that was likely. He's now adjusted that timeline to 6 months. Is that equally as unlikely?
I think it's rather unlikely. I wouldn't say impossible, but it's unlikely that the war will end in 6 months, unless, for example, Trump decides to sever all aid to Ukraine. Then he will not have to end anything, because Ukraine will capitulate and collapse within a few weeks. So I don't think that this is feasible. And of course, I do not think that the United States will completely abandon Ukraine, because this would be geopolitical suicide for the United States in Central and Eastern Europe. So I believe it's highly, highly unlikely that this will happen. However, of course, nothing is impossible, because basically Russia has certain battlefield objectives that it has not achieved yet. Russia has annexed 4 Ukrainian oblasts: Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk and Lugansk, and they seek to capture all of the territories of those oblasts. However, they haven't yet. Yes, they control the vast majority, about 70 or 80% of these regions combined. However, for example, the urban centers, as my colleague Mr. Ivan just mentioned, of Kherson and Zaporozhye, for example, remain outside the control of Russia. Important cities in Donetsk, like Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, for example, remain in Ukrainian hands. So I think that the Russians need to secure an agreement where they can, I think they can secure an agreement where they can take control or take over these cities and the remainder of these provinces through an agreement, or they will try to do that by force. And I think that this is what the Russians have elected to do so far. However, on the other hand, the Trump administration reportedly said that it might actually try to mount more pressure on Russia through further economic sanctions, through trying to decrease the price of oil by trying to pressure the OPEC and basically the Gulf states to increase oil production in order to decrease the price of oil. However, that remains unlikely, and the Russians have managed over the past 3 years to cope with an unprecedented amount of sanctions, and also with many advanced weaponry that was given to Ukraine and used by the Ukrainian armed forces against the Russians. And just let me comment very swiftly on what Mr. Yuas said regarding receiving permission to target Russia and move the war into Russian territory. How did that work out, by the way? Didn't yield any meaningful results. It only increased the public support inside Russia for Putin, for President Putin and his government, and it also basically gave him more reason in order to be more adamant in trying to settle this war.
Okay, well, Dr. Osman, you've made that point there, so let me bring Ivan Qnews back in. Dr. Osman says going into Russian territory was a mistake, and it's made things worse for Ukraine. How would you view that?
I don't think so. I just explained because Russia, of course, have a plan to freeze the war, prepare, accumulate forces, and start another war like it was in 2014 and 2015, when Russia succeeded to capture Peninsula Crimea, and then Donetsk, Lugansk, and some part of Donetsk and Lugansk region. They have a pause, they accumulate forces, and then on the 2022, they start the second chapter of this war. But after the situation in Kursk, the idea of Russia to freeze the war failed, because freezing war means that Russia lost some small part actually, but nevertheless they're losing part of their territory. Now Russia spent enormous quantity of bombs on Kursk region. So they're sending those bombs not on Ukrainian territory, but sending them on Kursk. And that is so important for Ukraine that Russia spent a large, not large, but some, part of their weapons to destroy our position in Kursk region. And we start to think that all those bombs could be used against Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian village, killing Ukrainian civilians. But instead of that, they sending those bombs into their territory, into their villages, and actually they're killing their own people, like it happened in Suja several weeks ago. So, of course, for Ukraine, it's important to show to Russia that, you are not so strong, because on the one hand, it's accumulate support to Putin, but on the other hand, people in Russia were sure that Russia is so strong, that Russia is the second army in the world, and Russia could capture not only Ukraine for them it's nothing. They dreamed about European countries. They like to say to Poland that Warsaw was a part of Russian empire. They like to say that they want to repeat the end of the Second World War, when Russian soldiers captured Berlin. And it was a part of the Russian ideology. And now people in Russia start to think that, we are so strong, but our territory for more than half a year under control of Ukraine. So that's why on the one hand, it's really helped to Putin to preserve support. But on the other hand, it's create question to him that probably we're not so strong, or you appoint a wrong people to respond for this war. And that's create a conflict inside Russian society. And let's be frank, as an economist, I think that the parallel economic pressure and problems that create for us and Russian citizens, they start asking questions that you promised to us a very fast war, but instead of fast war, we'll receive a long war with economic problems. And to live in these problems, we don't expect for a long time. Nevertheless, it's a new reality, and Russian people, knowing that they have problem in economy, that some part of the territory not under their control for the first time since the actually Second World War period. For them it's shocking, and as for me, it could create a good background for even revolution in Russia or something like that. We see in time of Prigozhin riot, and they as they said, that march of justice to Moscow, that was stopped.
Well, yes. I'm going to jump in there because I want to bring Dr. Osman back in. You can comment on Mr. Qnews' assertions about Russian expansionism, should you choose. Also, I want to bring in the United States back into the conversation. Do you think that US sanctions on Russia are the only way for Washington to deal with Moscow?
I will answer your question as part of my reply to Mr. Qnews, and there's plenty to comment on what he said, because of course I do appreciate that he is a citizen of Ukraine, and that might cloud his intellectual judgment, because apparently he has not been following the news. The Ukrainian armed forces are being crushed on the battlefield in eastern Ukraine, and Russia is advancing on an unprecedented pace, rather. And I do not know where does the assessment come from that Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia is far from being as powerful as the Soviet Union. They do not profess the power or the ability to conduct a wide-scale war in order to invade Europe, and they would never dare attack NATO because that will mean they're in nuclear annihilation or a mutual annihilation of both parties and basically an apocalypse for the entire world. So I think that this kind of rhetoric basically does not reflect the realities on the ground. The realities on the ground are the Russian economy has withered, has survived the economic sanctions. They have established very strong economic ties, the global south and with China. Russia is a net exporter of energy. Russia is still has a strong economy. Putin enjoys rather unprecedented public support, according to polls that were carried out by opposition groups inside Russia, some of them funded by the United States and US aid, now that they're now almost defunct USAID. So I honestly do not know how we are still thinking in the same way and speaking in the same way as we were speaking in 2022. Oh, Russia is about to collapse. Oh, Russia will witness a revolution. Oh, Russia this, Russia that. This is not true. This is destroying Ukraine. You know, actually, this is one of the few things that I might agree on with the Trump administration. This war needs to be settled in a way that ensures the survival of the Ukrainian state as a coherent state, not just as a rump state or even as a state that has been completely destroyed by a wave of Russian invasion and aggression. I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna, let me give Mr. Uaz the right of reply to those comments made there by Dr. Osman.
Yes, of course we should understand that Russia preserved its economy after 3 years of full-scale war, but it doesn't mean that the situation is so ideal one. You know, if you switch on Russian TV, they said that they are ready to, they're not even ready, that they are actually in war with NATO. They're not talking that NATO helping Ukraine. They said, no, we're in war in NATO. And when, yes, it's meaningless. But it's nonsense. Yes, I agree that it's nonsense, nevertheless. For Russia, it's absolutely normal thing to say that we're in war in NATO. As for Russia economy, you know, sometimes we joke that foreign experts, US experts, European experts, are more optimistic about Russian economy as the Russian National Bank or Russian Central Bank. Because Russian Central Bank in the previous year made a forecast that in this year they can face with collapse of their reserves. Reserves that help to Russia in 2022, 2023, and 2024 could be equal to zero in 2025 because they constantly use it. Only in December, Russia used 1/3 of their reserves just for covering our problems. And it means that now in their reserves, they have figure that could be equal to demand of the current year, furthermore, not for whole year.
What about the Ukrainian economy? Ukraine is defaulting on debt. How about that?
Yeah, of course, Ukraine have problems too, but let's be frank.
It's in shambles, my friend. It's in shambles.
Well, you asked the question, Dr. Osman. Let him answer.
Yeah.
Yes, Ukraine, of course, has problems. It's not a secret, but Ukraine has very good partners. European Union, Japan, South Korea. It's countries, not the last economy in the world. And with Russia, who is with Russia? Belarus could not seriously help to Russia. China is not the country that will help to Russia. China has its interests, but they're not planned to seriously help to Russia because 24% of Chinese turnover, actually it's European Union and the United States. Russia, it's only 4%. That's why China is a really country that understands that why they should help to Russia and have the problems with the sanctions from the US and from other countries. Actually, those sanctions already influence on the fact that Russia could not sell its oil, some enormous quantity of tankers.
Well, let's talk about this question. I'll bring Dr. Osman in on this one first. This Ukraine's vast mineral reserves, are they now in play?
Trump is blackmailing Ukraine now, as we can see. He's telling them that if you want us to continue supporting you in any way and giving you aid, you have to give us your rare earth metals and minerals, you know, the pure blackmail. And of course, and interestingly enough, President Zelensky responded to President Trump saying that 70% of the rare earths are in eastern Ukraine and in the Donbass, which is largely under the control of Russia. So I think what remains of the rare earths, I think, will be exploited by American companies. Maybe I do not know how they will work that out. However, if Ukraine agrees to give away its own natural resources in order to continue a nonsensical, vague, and endless and pointless war with Russia, I think that says a lot about the current Ukrainian leadership.
Well, I just want to bring back on this point because we have to finish just very briefly, Mr. US.
Yes.
When it comes to Trump blackmailing Ukraine in exchange for aid, you must be very upset by that.
Let's remind the evolution of this idea. First of all, Ukraine proposed the victory plan of President Zelensky, and one of the items of that plan was the idea to use Ukrainian resources. Because Ukraine understands it was October 2024 that if Trump wins, he can stop support to Ukraine, but we desperately need the support. So we should do something to be interesting to US to remain the support. That's why when Trump said that, oh, I proposed Ukraine a deal, actually this deal was formed in Ukraine and given to Trump in the Ukrainian victory plan. Why? Because there is a very good phrase. As many persons will have the same interest as yours, you win this game. So for winning war versus Russia, Ukraine needs not only countries that will say that, oh, we support you.
Okay.
We need countries that will have direct interest in Ukrainian victory, and this victory will be. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been a very spirited conversation. Thank you to both of you for joining us on the program. Dr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist. And Mr. Ivan US, an advisor at the Ukrainian National Center. Thank you both for joining me on the program. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the program. And thank you very much for joining us. And stay tuned for more here on Q News.